think of terrific TV shows, you know, the sort of thing that we all liked to watch when we were growing up. Who remembers Hawaii Five-O? Remember that? I thought it was a brilliant show. Jack Lord, what a smoothie he was in that show. Did you know he could have been James Bond? Yes. And I just thought it was great, wasn't it? Because I thought for those of us that didn't travel around the world and didn't see exotic places like Hawaii where it was filmed and all that sort of stuff, it gave us a window on the world that we'd never seen before. Of course, though, I loved Columbo too, didn't you? With Peter Falk. Brilliant, wasn't he? Always shuffling around in that Mac and suddenly solving the murder very cleverly just by bumbling his way through it. One big show that I was lucky enough to meet both stars over here and many of the guest stars was none other than this Lou Grade epic from ITC, The Persuaders. Now, The Persuaders was one of these sort of shows that really was very expensive for Lord Lou Grade. He didn't normally snap open the wallet that much, a man after my own heart, you know, but he did snap it open to book and guest star, of course, the two main stars, should I say, Sir Roger Moore and Tony Curtis. But they had a problem because, as ever, billing had to be Curtis and Moore, Moore and Curtis. Flip it around, depending on which episode you saw, that type of thing. Those were the egos. Now, Roger Moore told me that they loved making the show, but the bottom line for him was that, of course, it was a precursor to his starring role coming up in none other than 007 James Bond. But that path wasn't that easy either, because he'd already missed out on that in the late 60s when George Lazenby, the Aussie model, was picked to take on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I thought George did a terrific job personally, you know. He was very much like the James Bond, but nobody really could truly eclipse Sean Connery. He'd made the role his own, hadn't he? And of course it would take a little bit longer for Roger Moore to land that part. But back to The Persuaders, you see, what had happened was the show had started off not too great in the ratings, but then truly took off, and took off it did. And of course they had to put some more budget in it. They got some wonderful guest stars like Dame Joan Collins, Terry Thomas, stuff like that. Now they were planning the next series according to Sir Roger, and they liked the idea finally of actually going to film on more locations, because obviously certain elements of the show had been shot over here in London, like Downing Street, and of course the beautiful Sussex coast holiday resort of Brighton. So there were many areas that they utilised, which was very good when you think about it, because it got people thinking, well, if it's good enough for The Persuaders, it's good enough for me. Now, one star they hoped to make sure that they could get for the next series was none other than old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra. Now, Frank Sinatra, of course, was a movie star, and a mega movie star with a mega movie star price tag. You see how this works. Now, Frank, of course, was no stranger to television. He'd had huge success all through the 1950s with his own TV show and various others, appearing on Ed Sullivan and all of the big variety shows, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., every one of his friends. But he hadn't really taken on an acting role in television for some time, even though he had not been short of offers. And the idea originally was to try and book in the beautiful daughter of Frank, Nancy Sinatra, to play a sort of scheming baddie. And it would have been very clever, of course, because she'd already become a mega pop star thanks to the likes of These Boots Are Made for Walking. And as Roger told me, things were going quite well. But then, guess what? Frank said, well, I like the show and I wouldn't mind appearing in it. All plans changed. Lou Grade had something of a minor wobble, shall we say, because he wondered what would the price tag be. But because his daughter liked the programme so much, apparently Frank was happy to appear alongside both of his friends, Roger and Tony, even if it was simply a cameo or something like that. Everything was set in place. And then just as all of this came around and things were going to go into a second production, Tony Curtis got another movie back in Hollywood, and Sir Roger Moore finally got into more deep meetings about becoming 007 James Bond. By the time, as we now both know, the stories accumulated, sadly Roger was becoming James Bond and had been told by the bosses, Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, that he needed to lose all the weight that he piled on while enjoying himself filming across the wonderful area of the south of France. And so, sadly, that was really part of the reason why the second series of The Persuaders never happened. And more importantly, that's the whole reason why Frank Sinatra never got to appear with Curtis and Moore alongside his beautiful daughter Nancy in a mega television smash. And that's really how showbiz works. Neil Sean, Lambeth Palace, London.